On the morning of September 8, 1934, tragedy struck an American ocean liner carrying over 600 people north through the western Atlantic Ocean. The SS Morro Castle, a huge vessel that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to build, suffered a deadly fire, taking the lives of many on its final voyage to New York. Today, we will be looking at the fateful tale of this ocean liner, examining the ship's history, its time on the waves, and the disaster that brought its story to an abrupt end. Join us for another episode of Maritime Mishaps as we set sail to explore the fate of the SS Morro Castle. The SS Morro Castle was first constructed between the years of 1929 and 1930 at the Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company in Virginia. This was made possible by the passing of the Merchant Marine Act in 1928, where the United States Congress subsidized a $250 million fund to shipping companies across the company. Companies who took the loan could pay it back over the course of 20 years, meaning that many jumped onto the opportunity to build new vessels. The New York and Cuba Mail Steamship Company was one such organization and decided to begin work on a new vessel in the month of January 1929 at the Newport News site. The goal was to create a vessel that could carry people, mail, and trade goods from Havana, Cuba to New York. Top naval architects began work on two vessels, one of which would become the SS Morro Castle, named after the Castillo de los Tres Reyes del Morro fortress and lighthouse in Havana. The SS Morro Castle was completed in March of 1930, and it was certainly a spectacular vessel. 155 meters, or 508 feet in total, and weighing in at over 11,000 gross register tons, the most advanced maritime technology available at the time was installed in the building process. This was a ship that was supposedly designed to last a long time. Twin turbo electric generators supplied power to the propellers, which were in turn equipped with propulsion motors. This permitted the ship to travel at 18 knots, or 21 miles per hour. On top of this, wayfinding and submarine signaling technologies were installed for operators to utilize. Echo sounding equipment and a gyro compass were installed a few years later to replace these additions when new technology was developed. In addition to the top of these range exterior and technical design, the interior of the ship was designed for one purpose: luxury. State-of-the-art furnishings adorned the areas of the vessel permitted for 489 passengers to enjoy, split into first class and tourist class. In total, the ship was capable of carrying 240 crew members, which included engineers, officers, sailors, and navigation staff, caterers, and more. The SS Morro Castle took its maiden voyage on the 23rd of August, 1930, just a few months after completion. The ship and its crew traveled first from New York to Cuba with full capacity, covering a distance of over 1,000 miles in just 59 hours. After reaching Havana, the trip back up to New York took just 58 hours. The first signs were good. This was a ship that could quickly and efficiently transport crew, cargo, and customers up through the Atlantic without any problems. Following the success of the first few voyages, the SS Morro Castle and her sister ship, the Oriente, found themselves at sea essentially round the clock, stopping only for routine maintenance checks and repairs. Throughout the course of the early 1930s, they proved a reliable source of income for the USA, despite the ongoing Great Depression, perhaps due to their ability to function as versatile trade ships and tourist vessels. Moreover, throughout the introduction of Prohibition, the SS Morro Castle was a major provider of legal, affordable alcohol, and so many customers would book voyages onto the ships to drink when alcohol was not available at home. So, everything was set for the SS Morro Castle to be one of the most successful vessels in America. It was efficient. It brought in literal boatloads of money for a struggling America, and was big enough to do its bit for the economy. What could go wrong? On the 5th of September 1934, just over 4 short years after the vessel's initial construction, the SS Morro Castle departed from port in Havana to routinely return to New York City. For the first day of the voyage, everything was going to plan. The vessel managed to safely leave the waters of the Caribbean Sea, sailed around the Florida Peninsula, and began to make its way up the east coast of the United States. Around the evening of September 6th, and throughout the course of the 7th, the weather began to change, however. Dark clouds began to whirl in the sky, and rain began to fall. By late morning on the 7th of September, a nor'easter had begun to form in the Atlantic, a large-scale tropical cyclone composed of winds blowing in from the northeast. While this turn in the weather could not directly cause the impending disaster, it would impede rescue efforts later down the line. Before the ship was in any real danger, tragedy struck the crew. The ship's captain, Robert Renison Wilmot, passed away on the evening of September 7th, shortly after eating dinner in his quarters. After eating, it was reported that the captain noted pains in his chest and abdomen, which ultimately progressed into a lethal heart attack. The disaster meant that, by default, the role of captain had been passed on to William Worms, the chief officer of the ship. Worms took charge and continued the vessel's voyage up the coast of North America to its destination. Unbelievably, this would not be the worst thing to happen on this voyage, before a long, wide-scale disaster had struck. Just before 3 a.m. on the morning of September 8th, the first signs of a fire had been reported within a storage locker on the SS Morro Castle's first-class writing room. The specific source of the fire is still a mystery, but within a mere half hour, the blaze had engulfed much of the ship in flames. It was the construction materials used in the building process that are thought to have doomed the vessel. Veneered wood and glued paneling are thought to have made the vessel highly flammable. On top of this, the fire doors on the SS Morro Castle were lined with wood, meaning that the fire had spread to them before people could escape. Fire detectors were absent in the passenger areas of the vessel, and insufficient fire hydrants were available across the premises. Moreover, the Lyle gun, a device that allows a vessel to latch onto another for safe evacuation, was stored in the room where the fire originated. A recipe for disaster had been sparked, and the clock was ticking. When crew on board the SS Morro Castle caught wind of the fires spreading throughout the ship, they were quick to act. William Worms, the acting captain, decided to try and beach the ship on a nearby shoreline, but the top priority was to send out lifeboats to save as many passengers as possible. Beaching would have to wait. Shortly after the fire began to spread, it scorched the ship's electrical mains, meaning that there was no power or light across the entire vessel. In the middle of the night, this surely would have been a terrifying experience for anybody trapped inside. With no light to signal to shore and no radio to call for help, the crew's only option was to use their single flare to desperately attempt a rescue operation to be sent. Soon after, the hydraulic lines were burned, meaning that the vessel could no longer be steered. Stuck in offshore waters, it soon became a life-or-death situation for everybody on board. The ship's passengers were directed to the stern of the vessel to wait their turn for boarding a lifeboat. By this point, the fire had spread across the ship and thick smoke filled the air, making it hard for anybody on the ship, inside or on deck, to see or breathe. Crew members and passengers alike attempted to fight the fire with the limited extinguishers and water sources available on deck. Some decided to leap off the side of the ship into the water, which proved equally dangerous given the cyclone that was churning up high winds and tall waves below them. Others threw flotation devices and pieces of furniture overboard to give those in the water something to hold on to. By the time the fire had engulfed the SS Morro Castle, only 6 of its 12 lifeboats had been launched, carrying 85 people to safety, many of which or members of the crew. Tragically, 137 people lost their lives in the fire and ultimate sinking of the ship that day. Many of the dead were passengers, a great deal of which did not know how to use or access life preservers. As they simply jumped into the water with a preserver around their body, failing to take in the correct safety procedures, the devices knocked many passengers out, leading to them drowning at sea. Others tragically had their necks broken as the life preservers surrounding them hit the water with great force. What adds to the tragedy is that rescuers responded slowly to the already delayed attempt at getting the flare sent up. The vessels Andrea F. Luckenbach, Monarch of Bermuda, and City of Savannah eventually attended the scene, followed by the President Cleveland, the latter of which scouted the area, finding nobody at the scene, and returned ashore. Two additional U.S. Coast Guard vessels, the Tampa and the Cahoon, were reportedly little help when they arrived, positioning themselves too far away from the site to offer assistance. It wasn't until the bodies of those that had died in the disaster began washing up on the shore that float planes were sent out to search for survivors. On the shore, meanwhile, local residents of the New Jersey coast attempted to rescue those washing up, reuniting families that had been separated following the fire. Following the disaster, the SS Morro Castle was declared a total loss. Following the retrieval of its charred hull that had later washed ashore, its remains were towed to Baltimore via Gravesend Bay, where it was scrapped in 1935. The remainder of the wreck actually became a tourist attraction briefly, as it settled close to the Asbury Park Boardwalk in New Jersey. Local businesses were quick to set up shops, selling postcards and souvenirs around the area. Today, the only memorial to those lost in the fire sits on the south side of Convention Hall in Asbury Park, near to where this part of the wreckage settled. To this day, parts of the wreckage are still being discovered. An anchor was recovered in the September of 2023, reminding the world once more of this horrific maritime tragedy.